Hello, and welcome to The Immediacy of Teaching, Episode 2. I'm your host, Lexi Runnels. In the first episode, I discussed the reason for this program and a little bit about myself. I'm going to jump right into today's segment and really focus on some of the core issues that I wish to address in this podcast. Today, I will be interviewing a fellow educator and behaviorist, Matthew Barnsley. We will be discussing the issue of egos and how they can both negatively and positively affect the classroom. Like myself, Matthew sees and works with populations of students that are severely underserved in our current education system. I think that ego plays a significant role in this problem. Here's what Matthew had to say. What's your background in education?
I have a bachelor's degree in English. I've worked in a number of different school systems. I've worked in both a public school, a charter school, and I've worked for a corporation that ran after-school programs.
How do you think ego can play a negative role in the classroom?
Well, I think that the ego can affect both the students and the teachers. Sometimes with teachers, it can get in your way and prevent you from realizing what you're there for, which is ultimately to help the students. There have been a number of times where you find yourself enforcing something only because you feel like you're the one who's in charge and you're supposed to know what the answer is. And, you let your ego get you into confrontations that maybe you should avoid.
That's definitely true. Do you think that the student's ego can get in the way of their learning sometimes?
Yeah, definitely. The population that I work with has mostly been lower income. You call them at risk, I suppose. And a lot of times, because they don't have much else, they have their pride. And so a lot of times a student will dig in their heels simply to dig in their heels. And, so I think that there are those kinds of examples where a student can let their own ego get in the way.
Very true. On the other hand, do you think that ego can ever play a positive role in the classroom?
With a positive ego, you really need that because you have to have confidence in what you're doing. When you're the person that's in charge and an authority figure, you have to have confidence in the decisions that you make. If you waffle a little bit on your decisions, I think you can sometimes send the wrong message. Now, that isn't to say that you listen only to your ego and are so bullheaded that you aren't able to listen to other suggestions and ideas. But I do think that when you make a decision, you need to have confidence in that. And, a big part of teaching is kind of like acting and performance. And you definitely need confidence to go up on stage and, perform for these kids every day.
Do you have any specific stories of when you've experienced ego playing a negative role in the classroom?
Yeah, like I said earlier, you can get yourself into a situation where you're when you ultimately boil it down to it, you're just arguing with a child. And at the time, it doesn't feel like that. At the time, it feels like, oh, I have this point I need to make, and they need to respect my authority, and they need to listen to me, and really, you're not in control. The kids only do what they do because they choose it. They don't have to listen to you. You try to make it so it's the best option. But if you don't, keep your ego in check, you can find yourself, I don't know, arguing with a student for no reason. And really, your goal is not to go there and control them or tell them what to do. It's to impart knowledge upon them, and really that's it, and teach them how to become productive members of society.
Absolutely. Do you have any suggestions on how you keep your ego in check, or how others could learn to do so?
Well, I don't think that there's any magical answer to that. You just try to constantly remind yourself, well, why you're there and the purpose for your job is. And, there are times, like I said, I don't always keep my ego in check. And, you think you know something, and you have the confidence to feel like you looked into something enough and understand it, but really you don't know a lot. And so I just, in moments where I feel myself getting frustrated or feel like I'm really pushing for something, I try to think about, is this just my ego wanting this, or is there a rationale that ultimately ends up helping the student?
Do you think that administrators can do anything to support their staff and their teachers to help them keep egos, the staff and the students, in check in the classrooms?
Yeah, I think an administrator, one of the things I hear most from administrators that I've worked with is that, a lot of the times they feel like they didn't know that there was a problem with something, or they weren't aware that something was happening in the classroom or amongst staff or whatever the situation is. So as an administrator, I would really encourage open and honest communication, and really unfettered communication. People should feel like they could go to you if you're, say, the dean of students, and talk to you about how you're dealing with a particular student, and not feel like they're speaking out of turn. I think every teacher and every administrator can always be benefited by hearing a critique of their methods and talking to somebody about it from a third perspective. I think that's always really helpful. So,
thank you, Matt. That was my interview with fellow educator Matthew Barnsley. As you can see, he agrees that the ego can play a huge role in the classroom, in both a negative way and a positive way. In order for us not to let our ego get in the way of teaching in the immediate, we should take a look to our peers and administrators for support and ideas on our teaching practices. We should also always remember the true reason we are in the classroom. It is not to pat ourselves on the backs for knowing a lot about our content area. Instead, it is to support and teach the students. Thank you for listening, and remember to keep your ego in check and teach in the immediate.